Come with me back to Moab, Utah, May 18th, 2012. I was over there with a bunch of my friends who go every year to ride mountain bikes. Now that morning, we all came out of the condo wearing our spandex bike shorts. Yeah, I know, you have an image. We were also wearing our form-fitting, muscle-exposing bike shirts, our incredibly expensive wraparound sunglasses, and our multicolored helmets, looking good, ready to ride. So we made our way up to the trailhead for the Porcupine Rim Trail, got ready to start down. Now keep in mind, these guys I was riding with were pretty hardcore riders. Me, not so much. So I volunteered to hold down the rear guard while these guys all took off down the hill toward the Castle Valley Overlook ahead of me. Now about 45 minutes into this particular ride, the trail crosses a paved road. So about that time, I looked off in the distance, and sure enough, there they all were, popping up on the pavement, back down into the dirt. Eventually, I made my way down there to that paved road, skipped up on the asphalt, back down into the trail. And that's when I saw this half-buried log coming up, and these willows over here, and these rocks over here. And I remember thinking, I'm either going to have to jump that or find a way around it. And that is the last thing I remember from the ride. The next thing I remember is waking up, recognizing that I was still on the trail, but I wasn't on my bike anymore, and I wasn't moving. In fact, I couldn't move my right arm. It was paralyzed. And in that moment, I understood something in my gut that I'd never even heard of before. And that is that many years ago, Plato told us to be kind. For everyone we meet is fighting a hard battle. And in that moment, that was me. We'll come back to Moab in a few minutes. But right now, I'd like to pause and just say thanks. Thanks for being here today. You know, Woody Allen tells us that 80% of success in life is what, you know? Yeah, showing up. And by virtue of the fact that you are here today, creating community and getting better at what you do, tells me you're the kind of folks who show up, the kind of folks I like to hang out with. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to hang out with you today for a few minutes while we talk about this idea of seeking out hard things to do, because that's where we find the biggest rewards in life. Now, help me get to know you just a little bit better. Last time I checked, we have 6 tracks here today, is that right? Yeah, okay. So, quick show of hands for me if you are in golf courses. Ooh, wow, bunch in golf courses. Okay, so how about, let's see, services. You keep the machines running. Okay, let's see, landscaping. Okay, saw a few hands. Okay, there's one for landscaping. All right, good, thank you. So pest control, both animal and vegetable. Anybody? Yep. Okay, a few. All right, and irrigation and environment. Okay, a couple. And finally, how about sports turf? Yeah, a few more. All right, good. So thank you for sharing that with me and helping me to get to know who's in the room here a little bit better. You've confirmed something for me that I thought was probably true. And that is that very soon, you're going to be out there working sunrise to sunset. And the longer the days get in the summertime, the longer your work day is going to be. That's just going to be your life in general now for a little while, right? So here's something that I've observed about life in general over the course of my 60 years on the planet. Maybe you have too. It's been my observation that life is generally good. It's also generally hard. And I think there might be a relationship there. We'll talk about that during our time together here today. Now here's something that I've been told about you. I've been told that you often don't get the respect that you deserve from the people who use your products. Yeah, I get it. It's like that with me in the airline business. My customers, my passengers, think of airlines just the same way they think of cell phone companies. They just expect bad service. So they come to my workplace, the airport, with a chip on their shoulder, and when something bad happens to them that's totally outside my control, they let me know about it anyway, just like you out there on the golf course. Now, here's something that I thought might be true before I came to this conference, and it was actually confirmed for me yesterday in the head pro and superintendent roundtable. And that is that there are parts of your life that have nothing to do with anything green. You have families that need tending and futures to plan for. Now, these are all things that I've learned about you through conversations with Jeremy, your president, and Becky and Kim, your executive directors, and Mike, your conference chair. And by the way, haven't Mike and Becky and Kim done a great job putting this conference together for you? Let's let them know how much we appreciate what they did here. So can I tell you real quick here just why I got so excited when Becky called me a few weeks ago and asked me to come and visit with you today? I bought my first house in 1985, back when I was a young military pilot in the Air Force stationed at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska. I bought this house out of foreclosure, which meant it hadn't seen a lawnmower in over 2 years. Now, during that time, the city had come by with a bush hog to try to keep it from becoming a literal urban jungle. The city had failed. And by the time I got a hold of that property, it was pretty much a wildlife refuge. Had all the weeds, had the crabgrass, the spurge, the nutsedge, enough dandelions to feed a family of 4 for a year. And the moles. Oh my gosh, the moles. I felt like Bill Murray in Caddyshack. Come to Carl, varmint. Okay, I thought that was funnier in rehearsal this morning. Now, my dad was an agronomist at the University of Georgia, a weed control specialist. And I called him up, told him about all these weeds. He had some suggestions for me, but the best suggestion he made was for me to call my local county extension agent down there in Sarpy County, just south of Omaha. Now, we've got some university folks here. Do we have any county agents here today, any extension agents? There's a couple. Good. You guys are awesome. So that guy down there in Sarpy County taught me to do what you do, how to use your products, how to do your techniques. And over the course of the 4 years that I lived in that house, I was able to take that wilderness and convert it into a park. Now, the next little bit I'm going to tell you may seem just a little bit weird, but I think you'll track with me here. We'll see how it goes. But now think back to when you were a kid and your parents had a smell that was very comfortable to you. Maybe it was your mom's perfume or a soap that she used, or maybe your dad's cologne. And now when you're walking down the mall and you get a whiff of that, whatever it was, it takes you back to your childhood. It's actually familiar and comforting. Well, when I was out there treating those, now I got to tell you this, the dad I said was a weed control specialist. So when he came home from work, he had a faint chemical smell on his clothes. And when I was treating all those dandelions there at my house, I recognized that faint smell of 2,4-D as one of my favorite smells in the world. Yeah, you got it. Okay, good. So my dad, the agronomist, he taught me an appreciation for what you do. But he never brought his work home. He always left his work there at the experiment station. And Jeremy, you're going to appreciate this. We were at the dinner last night. Jeremy was talking about when he was a superintendent, how the last thing he ever wanted to do was come home and spread fertilizer and weed control out there on your yard at home, right? So everybody knew where Jeremy lived. Well, it was the same with us. My dad was a weed control guy, left his work at work, so we were the house that had the Dallas grass a foot high in our yard. Several years after Dad passed away, my mom found an old Bible up in the attic, and there was a slip of paper tucked away in that Bible and a handwritten note on that paper where Dad had written out a quote from Gulliver's Travels. He gave it for his opinion that whoever could make 2 ears of corn or 2 blades of grass to grow on a spot of ground where only one grew before would deserve better of mankind and do more essential service to his country than the whole race of politicians put together. Isn't that neat? Well, of course, that's you. Thank you for being the person who can make 2 blades of grass grow where one grew before. When I think of you, I think of my dad. And I'm really glad to be here, showing up here with you today. So here we are, mid-December. This is your season of rest, right? Yeah, I know. I'm seeing some chuckles out there. A bunch of you guys got up real early just a few days ago to go out and plow snow. Well, thank you for doing that. Be that as it may, it won't be long now before you're going to be back out there from dawn to dusk doing what you do. Maybe think of something that President John F. Kennedy said way back in the early 60s when he was making his case to the country about his big dream to go to space. He said, "We do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard." He understood that if we are willing to do hard things, that we live big lives that are abundant. Today, I encourage you to seek out hard things as big dreams, because that is where the good stuff lives. So let's see. Big dreams, big goals. What might that look like? Well, if you pick the right goal, it's going to be big, it's going to look hard, and importantly, it's going to have a big payoff attached, big enough to be worth it. So let's see if we can figure out what a nice, big, fat, worthwhile goal might look like for the Rocky Mountain region here. Okay, I got something. How about a Super Bowl for the Broncos? Okay, why are we laughing? Yeah, okay, I get it. We're 5-8. It's a nice dream. I'm not going to give up on that dream just yet, but I am willing to take that dream and just sort of set it over here on a shelf and come back to it in the fall. But while we're talking about Super Bowls, let's talk about another Super Bowl. Let's go back to 1972 and Super Bowl number 6. Okay, it occurs to me that you might have a hard time going back to 1972 if you've never been to 1972. So a quick round of applause if you were not even alive in 1972. Oh my goodness, I see you clapping over here. That's happening more and more these days. All right, so quick history lesson for those of you who weren't on the planet. 1972 was Super Bowl number 6. Dallas Cowboys versus the Miami Dolphins. Now, back then, as is true today, it was customary for somebody to come out and sing the national anthem to get things going. Now, that day, it was the Air Force Academy Cadet Chorale. And they did a fantastic job with the Star Spangled Banner. And as they finished the last note course, here came the Thunderbirds, the Air Force demonstration team, in their old big fat F-4 Phantom jets roaring across the field, that black smoke, trailing behind them. And that was just a really exciting thing for a 7th grade kid like me, watching all this on television, sitting in my armchair in a small town in central Georgia. Well, over here on the other side of my living room was my dad, sitting in his rocking chair, smoking his pipe. No, it wasn't that kind of pipe. It was a tobacco pipe. Perhaps you've seen a picture. So Dad's over there smoking his pipe. I'm over here watching all this on television, and I looked over at Dad as soon as the Thunderbirds went over. I looked at Dad and said, "Boy, those Air Force cadets, they're cool. Too bad I could never be one of them." And this is what he did not say. "Yeah, you're probably right. You're just a small town kid from a working class family. You go off, do a couple of years of community college, and start your normal life from there." All he said was, Why not? He knew that if he let me fight for my limitations, that I'd get to keep them. And he didn't want to have anything to do with that battle. Let me say that again. If we fight for our limitations, we get to keep them. Why not? Never even occurred to me. But he had planted a dream in my head that I could get my mind around, I could believe in, that would take me ultimately to the Air Force Academy, to the Air Force itself, to the airlines, and finally here to have this conversation with you here today. Simple, right? Sure, but not necessarily easy. See, here's what we know. Stuff happens. Sometimes things get in the way, and it might take a while for the good stuff to show up. And that's why we understand these big dreams and goals to be hard. So I had this big dream and no idea how to bring it into reality. Didn't have Google in 1972. So I went and talked to my school counselor, and of course she knew exactly what I needed to do. She wrote me out a plan. I stepped out on that plan, and I started to take all the right classes instead of the fun classes. And I'd get up before breakfast and put on my hunting boots and go out and run for a mile. And I was doing those kinds of things for 4.5 years, from 7th grade to 11th grade, getting ready for my senior year at high school, where then I could apply to go to the Air Force Academy. Well, finally, I was a senior. Time to apply to join the Air Force Academy class of 1981. Well, the first step is to call my congressman. What? Yeah, you can't even apply to the military academy until you get a nomination from a congressman. So I wrote off to my congressman, Jack Flint. He kindly wrote back to me asking for a little more information, and I took that letter, set it on my desk where I do my homework, and it sat. And it sat. A couple of weeks later, Dad called me into the kitchen and said, hey, the congressman's office had called and said they were wondering if I'd received that letter, because they hadn't received my response yet. I said, yeah, I got it. It's on my desk there, you know. And Dad's fist came down on the kitchen table. Boom! That letter needs to go out tomorrow. The congressman has a deadline. And if he misses his deadline, you're done. It's over. Never even occurred to me that a congressman might have a deadline. But then I realized that if the congressman has a deadline, I probably have one too. So I better get this process going. So I sent back in the letter, got the nomination, and the next step was to go take a physical. Yeah, we're not just going off to college. We're joining the military. So we have to pass the military physical. So I called up to Fort McPherson, the closest Army base to my house, and made an appointment to go see the old Army doctor. And in creeps this ancient specimen of an Army doctor, might even be old enough to be the turf grass professional of the year. Okay, so nobody was paying attention a while ago when you said that. I thought, man, that's gonna kill. Anyway, this old guy comes creeping in, and you know, where he had hair, it was white, thin, and greasy, Coke bottle glasses, and shaky hands as he shined his light up into my nose, muttered something about eosinophiles, which I guess can be an indicator for allergies. I don't know. It sent me away. A few days later, I got a letter from the Department of Defense Medical Examination Review Board, DODMERB. And DODMERB said, because of these eosinophiles, I had to go see a nose specialist. Okay, we're looking at multiple doctor appointments here. I can see that. I'm really conscious of my deadline. I'm starting to get a little nervous about time slipping away here. So I called the nose specialist in my little hometown in central Georgia. Now, a small town, we only have one nose specialist. His next appointment availability wasn't for 10 days. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. So I went over to see him, did the appointment. He shined his light up in my nose, sent me away. A few days later, I got the next letter from DODMERB saying, good news, no eosinophiles. However, this nose doc also happened to be a nose surgeon, and he had reported that I had a deviated septum that needed to be surgically corrected. Seriously? What's a septum? Apparently that's what you call this piece of cartilage. It goes right down the middle of your nose, divides it into two halves. What's a deviated septum? Who cares? Have the surgery or forget about the academy, right? So I called the guy back up, and his next surgical appointment was 3 weeks out. Tick-tock, tick-tock. 3 weeks later, went, had the surgery. 2 more weeks for recovery. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I shined his light one last time. Yeah, you're good. I was able finally to send off my completed application to the Air Force Academy. The good news was my package was good enough to get into the academy. The bad news was class of 81 was full. I was too late, and I would not be joining the Air Force Academy class of 1981. So at this point, what do? Do you just recognize that, yeah, you really are just a small town kid from a working class family, no real business dreaming big? Do you fight for your limitations and step out of the process? Or do you think, maybe if I stay in the process, I know it'll be hard, but I hope it'll be worth it. And you regroup knowing that, yeah, at the end of this process, there's some really good stuff. So, yeah, you go back and you re-enter the process all over again. Do go off to that community college for a year while you write your letter to the congressman. And of course, there's another medical exam. Well, I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, but I'd learned my lesson about dealing with the old Army doctor. So I went over to Maxwell Air Force Base to see the Air Force doctor. And he did his thing, shined his light up in my nose, and very casually asked, so did you know that you have a hole in your septum? And I knew it was over. All of those right classes in high school instead of the fun classes, all those mornings I got up to go for a run, all that paperwork, all those letters to congressman, all for nothing now. And you're this Air Force doctor now. And you got this 18-year-old kid falling to pieces right before your very eyes. And to this day, more than 40 years later, I remember his kindness. He just said, this is really important to you, isn't it? Empathy, human connection, a tiny spark, a flicker of hope. And he knew something that I did not yet know. He could fix this. And unlike that old Army doctor, this Air Force doctor told me what his report was going to say. His report was going to say that this was a non-issue. It would have no impact on my ability to serve the United States Air Force in any capacity whatsoever. And weeks later, I was in Colorado Springs wearing the uniform of an Air Force Academy cadet in the class of 1982. Now, 2 things you might take from this experience. One is that my path to the academy was long, it was hard, stuff got in the way, but it was worth it. I learned as an 18-year-old kid that the simple act of being determined to stay in the process could take me to incredible places. But the more important point from this story is that we have the ability to impact other lives in what seem like ordinary, insignificant interactions. Now, when I'm out there flying my Boeing jets, a heading error of 1 degree is so small, it's almost impossible for me to even see it on my instruments. But if I don't catch it, I'm a full mile off course in less than 10 minutes. Now imagine the impact of that tiny little error on a long-haul flight halfway around the world. I could literally miss Australia. Just because an issue is small doesn't mean it's insignificant. Now that old Army doctor had me in his office for less than 5 minutes, but the sequence of events that he put into place kept me out of the academy for a full year. The Air Force doctor repaired all of that damage, and he put me on the path to success. I invite you to be the Air Force doctor in all of your interactions. Kindness, human connection, a tiny spark, a flicker of hope. Of course you're going to be kind to all those players out there on the golf course. But how much more impact could you have if you elevated that poor guy behind the counter at the pro shop? You know, the guy with the phone in the ear working on the tee sheets and trying to sell golf balls and not as frantic as he is. If you were able to make his life a little bit better that day, how many customers would you touch without even knowing about it? Or that coach at that school where you're creating an awesome playing field. You make his world a little bit better, and now he's different with all of his players. Be the person that changes somebody else's life, somebody else's world, just a little bit. Simple. Not necessarily easy, but there's so much good stuff in it. Now let's go back to this idea of your big dream. One of the hardest things to do is to stay in the process for as long as it takes to achieve our success. Back in 1962, a rising executive at IBM left to go start his own company. He grew it out for 22 years. And in 1984, he sold it off to General Motors for $2.5 billion. That company was Electronic Data Systems. And that executive was H. Ross Perot. Now, Perot knew a thing or two about success. And a few years later, somebody asked him, why do you suppose people fail? And he said, most people give up just when they're about to have their own success. They quit on the 1-yard line. They give up at the last minute of the game when they're 1 foot from a winning touchdown. Now, hold that thought for a minute and clap for me if you have a daughter. Our daughters teach us many things. Would you agree? And my daughter Anna taught me about this idea of staying in the process as long as necessary to grasp success, to grasp our good stuff. Her story actually starts a year before she was born. Now, back in 1989, Disney Pictures released a magnificent animated musical motion picture called The Little Mermaid. Now, that movie ignited an entire new golden era for Disney Pictures. Ariel, the Disney princess in that movie, was the first of a long string of Disney princesses that came out of that. Now, Anna was born a year later. And when she got old enough to watch TV, if I had let her, she would have sat in front of the television all day long, every day, and done nothing but watch that movie. She so loved Ariel and The Little Mermaid. Don't worry, I didn't do that. Every once in a while, I kicked her out the back door to go play with the German Shepherds, which she loved. Well, when Anna was 4, 3 of the cast members from The Little Mermaid brought that music on tour to Denver. And of course I got us tickets. And the night came, and Anna put on her little pink frilly dress, and I put on my coat and tie. And I took her little 4-year-old arm and put it on mine, and off we went down to the Betcher Concert Hall on our daddy-daughter date. Oh, come on. I thought that was going to kill too. Yeah, so we had great seats, stage right up here in the balcony. So Anna could lean on the rail and look right down on the performers as they sang about being a part of our world. You remember that was the hit tune from that movie? Well, it was a great concert. We thoroughly enjoyed it. But the highlight of the night was after the concert itself. Now, when you and I go down to the Betcher Hall and we see a concert, we enjoy the performers, and then they're whisked off into the wings, never to be seen again, right? Well, not that night. That night, Jodie Benson, the actress who had voiced Ariel, Little Mermaid herself, the star of the show, she sang her part in the concert, was whisked off into the wings, but then rather than disappear, she went around to the lobby to interact with all of her young fans. Now, picture the scene. Here is Jodie Benson, now this famous movie star, indeed Broadway actress, literally on her knees on the floor in the lobby of the Betcher Concert Hall, cutting it up with all these little 4, 6, 8, 10-year-old girls who are looking up at her and just adoring her. And she's just loving on them right back. It was a beautiful scene, a magical moment. Anna was right there in the thick of that. And that was the night that Anna's dream was born. That night, she decided she wanted to be Jodie Benson. She wanted to have a lead role in some sort of a Broadway-style musical, just like Jodie Benson. 4 years later, when Anna was in the 2nd grade, she joined the Colorado Children's Chorale. Now, many of you may know, the Colorado Children's Chorale does a lot of their performances right there in the Betcher Concert Hall. So time came for Anna to have her first concert with the Children's Chorale, and as she was getting ready, she was remembering that Jodie Benson had been right there a few years ago on the same stage. And she said, "Dad, I might even breathe some of the same air as Jodie Benson." Well, 4 years after that, well, let's put it this way. When Anna was in 2nd grade there, that's when that happened. And that's about the time that young singers and actors get out into the theater community to start practicing their craft. And she did that. And over the course of the next decade or so, she was in a whole bunch of productions. And when she was very new, it was not a big deal that she didn't have that lead role that she wanted. Nobody expected that. She was just a kid, right? But the closer she got to high school, the more urgent that desire became. She really wanted to have a lead role in a musical. Well, she got all the way to senior year without having a lead role in anything. But it was okay, because now she's the senior. And if you've ever had a kid who's a senior in high school, you know that seniors are entitled. Yeah, it's always their turn, right? So Anna knew that if for no other reason than the fact that she's now the senior, that she would get the lead role in the spring musical at Arapahoe High School. It was going to be Damn Yankees, so she went and got the script for Damn Yankees, studied the role of Lola, the female lead, went to the audition. She still didn't get that lead role. And I remember her disappointment that night in particular. And I remember thinking, maybe after all those failed auditions, she just really didn't have the chops. Well, that fall, she went off to college right up the road here in Casper, Wyoming. And she had managed to win a scholarship to study musical theater up there at Casper College. And so one of her first challenges there was to audition for their fall production, which was going to be a musical called Crazy for You. Now, I'm a musical theater geek, but I had never heard of Crazy for You. Turns out, Crazy for You was a pretty big deal. I'll tell you about that here in just a minute. But for now, suffice it to say that she finally won that lead role that she had wanted all those years. She had the lead role, Crazy for You, a brilliant moment in her life. It was a watershed event. But there was more. Now this is where I get to tell you about Crazy for You. Crazy for You had opened on Broadway in February of 1992, ran for 1,622 performances over the course of 4 years. And it was good enough to win a handful of Tony Awards for Best Musical and Best Actress. Who knew? Well, during that very successful 4-year run, the female lead in Crazy for You, Anna's first lead role, had been played on Broadway by Jodie Benson. So, through that role, Anna got to actually be her childhood hero. And how cool is that? But what if she'd never auditioned for Crazy for You up there at Casper College? What if she had given up after high school when she was on the 1-yard line about to achieve her success? Had she elected not to persevere through all of those failed auditions, her dream would have died and she wouldn't be an actress in Denver today. So I think if she were here with us this morning, here's what she would offer to you. It might take a while for the good stuff to show up. And she would encourage you not to give up at the last minute of the game, 1 foot from the winning touchdown. Good stuff. Hard things. The last thing she would tell you is that you can have the good stuff if you're willing to do the hard things for as long as it takes. Anybody here work hard? Anybody? Yeah, there's a few hands there. Some of you work hard. Well, we all work hard, don't we? It's always hard, especially in the summertime. Sometimes it's harder than others. What do you do, or what happens when somebody on your crew gets a summer flu and you have to take up the slack? Or you have an entire week of rain that puts you way behind schedule? Or your equipment manager quits and goes to work for Todd Creek? Yeah, Jeremy's the only one who thinks that's funny. See, here's the thing. We have to be able to keep going during crunch time, even when we're tired. Now, that's a lesson I learned 38 years ago when I was a junior at the Air Force Academy. I used to play with that. I used to say 8 years ago when I was a junior, and I'd wait to see if somebody called me out on it. I can't get away with that anymore. 38 years ago, I was a junior at the Academy. That was the year I had a chance to go to the Army's Parachute Training Jump School down in Fort Benning, Georgia. I know, I'm dealing with the Army again. Maybe I didn't really learn my lesson the first time. But I went down to Fort Benning for jump school. Jump school is a 3-week course. Let's call the first 2 weeks ground school. That's when we learned all the technical skills we needed to be able to jump out of perfectly good airplanes, which we then proceeded to do in week 3 5 times to get our parachutist badge. I know, I guess I really was young. Now, jump school is down in Fort Benning, as I say. Fort Benning is in South Georgia. And if I told you that I was in South Georgia in August, you would tell me it was hot and, yeah, it was hard to breathe down there. Now, here's something you probably understand about parachuting. You probably understand that when you have this nice big open parachute over here, you come down slower than if you don't have a parachute. Yeah, it's kind of the point. But something that you may not understand is that even when you have this parachute, you can still hit the ground pretty hard. And if you're not in really good shape, you can be injured. So one of the things the jump masters work really hard on during those first 2 weeks of ground school is making sure everybody's in the best possible physical condition before we go out there on week 3, jump out of those airplanes. Friday morning, week 2, the jump masters showed up at the training ground with a lesson that was going to be cloaked in physical conditioning. It really had nothing to do with those technical skills I was just telling you about. They wanted to teach us just how long we could keep going. So the lead ordered everyone to fall in, now. Now you got to understand, at jump school, everybody was airborne. Didn't matter if they were talking to an individual or an entire group, everybody was airborne, and this was South Georgia. So Pauline airborne means line up in this platoon formation. And then he said, all right, airborne, now we're going to go for a 1 mile condition and run, forward, march. Double time, march. And we were off and running. And let's just say the jump master established a brisk pace. Then he got faster. And then he got faster again. So by the time we got to the end of the course, we were at an absolute lung-searing, heart-pounding sprint. Really glad to see that finish line coming up. But that's when the other shoe dropped. Great job, airborne. Now we're going to go for another mile. Oh, a bunch of the guys dropped out of the platoon to rest because they just knew they couldn't go another mile. Not at that pace. Somehow, most of us managed to keep running. But we only had to go another 40 or 50 yards till the jump master called us to a halt. Quick time, march, platoon, halt, fall out. And as we were trying to catch our breath, the lead came around to the front of the platoon to deliver the lesson of the day. All right, airborne, now you understand that if you believe you can keep going as long as you need to, you're probably right. And you also understand that if you believe you can't, as he pointed back at our friends who'd given up just a few yards short of the end. You're probably right about that too, airborne. Because you see, it's always mind over matter. You can keep going as long as you need to. You just need to know you can. Yeah, it's always hard. Sometimes it's harder than others. Back when Anna failed that audition for Damn Yankees in high school, she had no way of knowing that her very next audition would be the one that made her dream come true. Thank goodness she was focused on the good stuff and kept going. The promise of the jump master is that you can keep going as long as you need to, because you are focusing on the good stuff that you know is coming down the pike. Now, all of these challenges that we've talked about so far today represent opportunities to step out of the process. But we don't. Because we recognize that while life is generally hard, it's also generally good. So we keep going. I woke up on that trail, literally coated in the dust of the Utah desert. I'd gone over my handlebars at about 20 miles an hour, landed there right on the top of my head, tumbled in the gravel. Nobody from my group even knew I'd fallen. Remember, I was tailing Charlie. I was holding down the rear guard. So it was up to the next group of riders to come along, find me laying there in the dirt. They pulled out their cell phones, called 911, got an emergency response. 45 minutes later, the paramedics showed up, rolled me up on the backboard, slipped me into the ambulance. And another 45 minutes later, we were back down the hill to the Moab emergency room, where we took x-rays and we found out that the reason my arm was paralyzed was because my neck was broken. Yeah, hard battle. Well, Moab is a small town. They have a small emergency room. They can take x-rays, but they can't do an MRI. And for a spinal cord, you need one of those. And so with a broken neck and a paralyzed arm, they thought they'd better figure that out. So they decided to call up to the big city, Grand Junction, and ask them to send the Flight for Life helicopter down for me, and they did. And in this picture right here, obviously that's me right there on the gurney. And that guy there in the white t-shirt and the do-rag standing at my head, he's one of the guys who was on the ride with us. His name is Seth Hardcastle. It's my 18-year-old son saying goodbye to me as they loaded me into that chopper to take me away with a broken neck. The helicopter landed. I took off for Grand Junction, And during that nice, smooth 30-minute cruise up to St. Mary's Hospital, I found myself thinking about the gravity of my situation. I mean, I knew, obviously, my neck was broken, my right arm was gone. And the question I couldn't push away was, how much worse is this going to get? Was I going to lose my left arm too? What about my legs? Were they going to quit working before I even got to Grand Junction? And that's when it hit me. Maybe now I could be a motivational speaker. Well, here are a couple of thoughts that did occur to me on my chopper ride. I would offer them to you as food for thought as well. Is there something you need to say to somebody close to you that you haven't said yet? Is there something you really want to do with your children or your grandchildren you haven't done yet? The helicopter landed up there in Grand Junction. They wheeled me into the MRI machine to do the test, wheeled me back out. And the neurosurgeon came over to give me the news. Yeah, Mark, no fooling. Neck's broken in 5 places. That's the bad news. The good news is there's no spinal cord damage. Doc, does it bother you at all that I can't move my right arm? Yeah, Mark, the nerves that control your arm are badly bruised back up here at the nerve root. But the bruise is actually outside the spinal column, which means it will likely recover. And sure enough, it was only a matter of hours before I began to regain function in my right arm. At that point, I was given a great gift. No, it's not what you're thinking. You're thinking, no fooling, sport. You got to walk away from a broken neck. Am I right? Yeah. That was a nice gift. But I'm talking about what the neurosurgeon did. She trussed me up in a cervical collar and said, for the next 90 days, don't take this collar off under any circumstances. Well, that kind of cramped my style during the summer of 2012. There were things I would have done, places I'd have gone, things I'd have seen. I couldn't go and see and do with a cervical collar around my neck. This watershed event had brought my life to a sudden stop. And I was given the gift of stillness for a change. 3 months to think about how I was going to respond to this challenge. So what did I think about? Well, I thought about my friend and mentor, Captain Mark Hogue. Many years ago, our airline declared bankruptcy. And the point of bankruptcy, of course, is to cut costs. So management made all the pilots take this big pay cut. Captain Hogue couldn't make his house payments. Lost his family home to foreclosure, personal bankruptcy. About the same time, he was diagnosed with cancer, twice. Both of the surgeries were successful, but the second time there was a complication. That cancer was up here in his thyroid, and the surgeon nicked one of the nerves that controls his vocal cords, and he was left without a voice. Something I haven't told you yet about Captain Hogue is that when he's not taking his passengers to weddings, business meetings, family vacations, as he travels all over our country, teaching our high schoolers, our middle schoolers, and even our elementary school children how to live lives without limits. And as part of that teaching, he challenges every student, regardless of age, to think about what he or she brings to life that no one else can bring. It's going to make this world a better place. But now he couldn't talk. Those are heavy burdens. But you'd never know any of it had happened to him unless you knew it had happened. He's one of the most positive, optimistic, fun to be around people you'd ever want to know. How does that work? Several months after his vocal cords healed up, I asked him about that. And he said, it's simple. Sometimes life kicks you where it hurts. And you can either lay there and moan, or you can get up and move on with what's important. Simple. Not necessarily easy. But one of the most important lessons life has for us during our time on the planet. If we are ever to succeed in anything we try, we simply must stay in the process. And because he chose to stay in the process and get back up and re-engage with life, he was ultimately able to overcome his surgical complications, his financial disasters. And now he's back out there sharing his wisdom with everybody he meets. And I saw him do that. And the lesson I took from watching him get back up and re-engage, and the lesson I bring to you today, is that it is possible to overcome challenges that seem overwhelming if we simply stay in the process. Say it with me now. It's simple. It's not necessarily easy. You know, I could hear his voice while I was laying there on my couch watching NCIS reruns through a morphine-induced haze. How about it, Hardcastle? What are you going to do? You going to lay there and moan? Or you going to get back up? All right. I got back up, got back to work. And as you know, it was only 3 months before I was back out there in my cockpit connecting my passengers with their moments that matter most. And 18 months after that, I had a book. The Symphony of Your Life, Restoring Harmony When Your World is Out of Tune. Stories about people just like you fighting their hard battles and winning. Here's one more thing I know about you. You have been through the bike crash in your life. Some of you maybe more than once. The Great Recession hit this industry harder than many. And you've had other financial challenges, family issues. What did you think about on your chopper ride? What did you learn? And are you using those lessons to guide you over, under, around, or through these challenges that can seem so big? Well, Captain Hogue isn't here today, so you don't get to meet him. But I think if he were here, I think he'd want to challenge you, just like he challenges everybody else he speaks with. I think he would ask you that same question. What did you bring to life that no one else can bring that's going to make this world a better place? Well, he can't challenge you, but I can. So here's my challenge. Sometime within the next 72 hours, carve out some stillness for yourself and sit with these ideas we've talked about today. Remember that the hard things are worth doing. And it might take a while for the good stuff to show up. And you can keep going as long as you need to. You just need to know you can. I'll close today with 3 gifts. The first is I give you permission to ask that life-affirming, opportunity-creating question, why not? And freedom to be kind to somebody in your path today. A human connection, a tiny spark, a flicker of hope. And finally, courage to seek out those hard things, because that is where the good stuff lives. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you all back there at the autograph table in just a few minutes.